Hello. Good morning.
Hey Alan, how you doing?
Hey, Leighton. Good.
Is
Morning.
everything finished with the move?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, I'm calling from New York, so
Oh, nice, nice. Oh, sorry, we also have Diego here. Hi.
hi, Diego.
Hello, hello. Hello, I'm Diego. I'm right now working with Lightstep on some open telemetry projects. So they asked me to join this meeting. So that's why I'm here.
Oh, that's awesome.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
You need the time zone stuff for this meeting? Or should we go back to the simple attendee list?
Good question. I think we only have like one new member, so maybe we could just reuse the old list.
Should we just start?
Yeah, I think so.
And Riley, the first point is from you.
Yes, I can share my screen.
Cool.
So after the alpha release, I start to test this like trace context implementation, and I noticed our behavior is very different. So this is a simple example I have, and I run this W3C trace validation service, which is also written by me and used previously by open census across several different languages. And I noticed we got a lot of failures. So it looks like current implementation is whenever we receive some invalid incoming trace context header, we'll just throw error, which is weird. So I think the goal of this like API and SDK implementation is even if someone send us the illegal trace context, we should be able to recover from that instead of aborting the application or like generating any errors.
Yeah, that sounds like a bug. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So like
Aborting.
given the number of failures, it seems like a little bit scary. I think I would call it a P1. I know, like Christian, you mentioned the P1. So
Yeah,
currently we don't
that's
have a good
new.
So currently we don't have a good definition, and in order for like people to be on the same page, we need to have the definition. But I think like having this according to the spec is one important thing.
Okay.
I would
Yeah.
like to call out. And I think this also brings the question, like we probably should have some like P1, P2, P3, P0 tags. After alpha, I expect people will start to give us some feedback. So we'll receive some random issue in GitHub, and having that priority will help us to coordinate.
Sounds useful. Yeah.
Okay, and the second one. So we've been asked by the spec. So this is a cross-language effort. Basically, we're saying any vendor-specific exporter logic should move away from open telemetry.
Yeah.
So currently, it's not very clear to me whether we will like under open telemetry there will be a separate repo where people can contribute. So that gives people a much better experience when they try to discover what we have, or we want all the exporters to move to whatever repo as long as they don't belong to open telemetry.
Yeah, I think there was talk about having a matrix on the website, like a table where you see a list of exporters per language, but I think this wasn't, there was no final decision on the details.
I see. So, okay, so based on my understanding from Christian, so it is okay to have some table or link from the official repo document, but
I think this was about the OpenTelemetry.io website, but
I see.
I think no one would object if you have a list of in the README or something like that. That would actually be not the worst idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and I figured that beta milestone is probably a bug, so we should fix that.
Yeah, I think I read the milestones document in the spec, and it says that on the 14th of October there is the spec alpha version 0.0. So if there isn't even a spec beta, we can't make a language beta. Yeah. we probably wouldn't also make it. We wouldn't make it in time anyway. That's a bug. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, sorry. So just to clarify, does that mean that if there's going to be maybe a table of exporters link, the exporter repos won't be associated with OpenTelemetry anymore?
So my understanding is for Jaeger and Zipkin, because they are, although it's a specific vendor, but given the position, it's more towards open source, not attached to a particular company, it's okay to leave them inside the OpenTelemetry repo. But for like Google specific stuff, Dynatrace or Microsoft basically were kicked away.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they said that even Jaeger and Zipkin should not live in the repository. There will just be the console exporter, and the OpenTelemetry protocol exporter eventually.
Got
Yeah,
it.
I would love to see that. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the P1 label, so Christian, you have some like ideas?
No, I just wanted to talk about this label since I've seen it for the first time, but you answered my question already.
So I would propose that we gather the idea like what does P0, P1, P2 mean, and do we need P3? So I think I have a pretty good definition in my head. P0 means a showstopper, so we should stop doing anything, just fix that.
So an emergency, yeah.
And P1 means something that's really important that we want to get it done.
So P0 would be something where we release a fix as soon as possible and make a new release immediately after it is fixed, something like that. Would that fit your definition?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Then that is well defined.
Yeah. And after this, I'm going to copy this like based on our agreement. I'll update the GitHub, so when you see the tag, you can see the definition there.
Yeah.
So for P1, I think it's something important, and we want to work on that. And unless we finish all the P1 items, we don't want to start any P2 item. So how do you think? So basically, no one is going to die, but this is important, and we don't want to talk about other things unless we fix all the P1 issues.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense though. I don't know how strict that would be in practice.
We probably need to refine that. And also I have bad English, so
no one is going to die.
I want to make it very simple so people, like my parents would understand.
So for example, we could say we don't want to release something that has known P1 bugs in it, unless we do it to fix a P0 bug.
Does that imply that P2 items are blocked by P1 items? Like if we don't want people to start working on P2 items before P1 items are finished?
No, this is more like suggestion. I don't think we're going to like rule out any like work.
All right.
Yeah.
And I propose that we don't introduce P3 because in Microsoft we have P0 to P3, and I'm really confused whenever I move to a new organization. They don't have a good definition.
You just wrote P2. Anything that is less important than P2?
Sorry.
P1. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then when an issue has no label, we know that this is untriaged and we should assign a label to it.
I think some issues will be feature requests, and for feature requests, I don't know if we want to put priority as well, but I think there's something comparable.
So this should be for bugs.
Currently, I think so. Although I think for features probably will also have priority, but currently I don't know the clear answer.
Yeah.
Okay, and
I think why shouldn't we apply these labels to feature requests also? I mean, P0 doesn't make sense for feature requests, but P1 and P2, why not? Maybe with slightly different definitions.
For feature requests, do we want to use maybe project rankings or something like that instead of discrete priorities? So you can rank cards on a project board, like on a Kanban board.
You mean we assign the issues to a project, like we say,
Like
Zipkin
Scrum style?
exporter, we have 3 open issues, feature requests for different things for the Zipkin exporter.
Right. The one at the top is the most important. The one at the bottom, least important.
Okay, so yeah, sounds good. I don't know if we need that yet, but
So for now, I would suggest that we use P1, P2 just for issues.
Yep.
just for bugs, yeah.
Bugs. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think I was sleepy when I was trying to dump all the items I want to bring. So we can talk about that from alpha release when we go through the work items, GitHub issues, and for log design, I think currently it's a lower priority. So I will put that at the.
What do you mean by log design? Do you mean like the
log explorer? So there are several works related. So first is when people use Python logs, we want to give them a way so they can fetch the trace ID and span ID.
Okay, this is like like what was there in OpenCensus. This is not about our internal logging. Okay.
Yeah, so this is done by Chris in OpenCensus, and I think this is an important feature, but probably not for alpha release.
No, I think they also said after 1.0 we shouldn't release any new features in the languages that aren't specified, any major new features. I think this would be a major new feature if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I created an issue for this in the specification repo. Yeah, Sergey mentioned that this is a good thing to add in this 0.3.0 version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I put it at the bottom side. I think it's a low priority for now.
Hey,
so
I guess.
Hey,
sorry to join late. We're gonna like add logging or log correlation. But we got to add it in the spec first, and I don't know if you've already talked about this at all, but we actually do have this on the agenda for like for Q1. But this
Q1
there's no there's like no plan for this to be before the 1.0 release. But it would have to be in the spec first. This is like not anything we can sneak in.
Q1, is that like next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And besides the trace context, like compliance issue, what are the major like alpha 0.01 release that in your mind? I think we probably need to tag them and make sure we address them in alpha 0.2 release. So currently, from what I've seen, the like the only thing I think we're missing is the compat with the trace context. Besides that, I think having the matrix exporter interface would be a good thing, a nice thing to have, but I'm not optimistic that we can get it done in the spec.
Yeah, the metrics are underspecified, the backend side.
So for matrix exporter interface, do we think this is something we can achieve in alpha 0.2 or not?
I think it depends on the spec, or maybe does Java have or another language have a reasonable implementation? Maybe we can copy from there.
Even if they did, I feel like they would be missing a lot of like things that are missing from the spec currently.
Okay, they're more like OpenCensus metrics.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
And I think I would want to see the Azure-specific stuff to be moved out from the repo.
Okay. Do you think we should make you will make a repository just for Azure, or should we make an OpenTelemetry contributions catch-all repository for Python?
I don't know. I would love to see some like OpenTelemetry repo for vendors to contribute. The reason is first, like if people make changes, it's much easier for them to see what the others are doing.
Yeah.
And also the licensing model, I think it makes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that the idea is to have an open telemetry contrib organization that will host a lot of this stuff.
And who's driving this?
No, there was somebody mentioning that in the past. So we need to poke people again, like, hey, we actually need this.
Okay, I think we can like pilot this from Microsoft side. So we'll try to see like who can help us to create that. Probably it'll be another.
Sergey.
Okay, so probably
yeah, probably.
It'll be another community or another repo under the same OpenTelemetry community.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And besides this, from your side, like what are the major things? I see like there's a Jaeger exporter pending PR, and I think it would be really nice to have that merged. So we have a first like vendor neutral, non-trivial exporter.
Yeah, there was the Jaeger exporter is further down on the agenda, but yeah, maybe we should. As I understand it, it is now following Open Census Python, the Open Census Python implementation. So it should basically work.
I can update you about the status of the Jaeger exporter if you want. So right now the implementation is just a porting of the Open Census Jaeger exporter. It's basically a porting of that. Some people in the community require not to have the generated files into the repo, but instead generate the files, Python files, based on the Thrift proto specification, the Thrift proto source files. So I already did that. So currently when you run pip install or setup install, the files are generated automatically. So there is still a discussion that is ongoing, not only in this repo, but in the other repos as well, is that currently the Thrift protocol seems to be the old one, and they are going to use the gRPC as the new one. So the current implementation that we have in Open Census and in this PR is using Thrift. So this is not totally clear for me if we want to introduce gRPC right now or if we want to delay that a little bit. I look around in the different implementation and we have different things. Go is using Thrift, Java is using gRPC, so there is no like a common implementation right now. So, so my proposal would be to keep going with Thrift for now. We can at least have the exporter that is working, and in the future we can look at the gRPC improvement for that.
I agree.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, good enough.
Yeah, also older versions of the Open of the Jaeger agent would not support gRPC, or would they?
So yes, actually I think that when we are going to introduce gRPC, we are not going to remove Thrift. Probably we will have to keep compatibility of them at the same time. I'm not sure, but maybe that's the best way. Because as far as I know, the agent of Jaeger doesn't support gRPC right now. So the only thing in Jaeger supporting gRPC is just the collector. So we still need to use Thrift to talk to the agent. By the way, and just to finish, there is also some discussion about if the exporter should send the traces to the agent and to the collector, to both of them, to just one of them. So this is the same. I look around on the different implementations in Open Census. It's something like the agent is mandatory, the collector is optional, in Go is something like if the collector is configured, the traces are not sent to the agent. So basically, to summarize also here, there is not a common approach to the agent collector reporting of the traces. So once again, my proposal here is just to keep the open census behavior, and in the future we can look again for this.
So to me, that sounds good. But just to be also in a better position, I would like to specify these details in the README of the exporter itself, you know, like, hey, this is what we support at this moment and whatever, you know, so at least people don't have to go and check the code to figure out what we are supporting and what we are not supporting.
Totally agree with you. Actually, the README is something that I totally missing on this PR, so I will add the README with the details and also with the configuration parameters, so the developers or the people can understand how to use this exporter.
Yeah, maybe a README, or maybe also I don't know if we generate Sphinx documentation yet for the SDK, but I think there should also be documentation strings in the source code.
Yeah. Agree.
Yes, actually the documentation is already in the code, but we are not generating the SDK nor the external packages documentation yet. So that will be a nice thing to have. By the way, we have an open issue for that, for generating the SDK documentation.
Good.
Will users be using the Jaeger exporter the same way, even if it's implemented in OpenCensus? I mean, implemented like similar to how OpenCensus was?
What do you mean by the same way? Do you mean the same parameters?
Yeah, like just like the interface that they
Yes,
use.
yes, the interface is the same. I just changed some names of the parameters that were not that clear for me. Maybe I review that into detail and make it clear into the documentation what are the names of the parameters.
Cool, thanks.
That sounds good.
Regarding the usability, I think it's similar like a DAT. So currently, when
you're right.
I'm trying to come up with the most simple example, and I figure it's not very as simple like or worse job compared to census. And I want to quickly go through the code and see some of the things. So for example, like here, when you register exporter, you have to understand this like thing, and configuring
that should be an implementation detail.
Yeah, requires multiple lines. And Christian, I remember he pointed out that it'll be ideal to have a like one line configuration. And also we talked about this like long time ago that like for example in Django and Flask or Pyramid, people would love to use configuration. So it'll be good to like having a better configuration story. The second thing is today, like we require explicit shutdown, which in OpenCensus, we have this nice grace period and the exit hook. So we automatically shut down those things. I want to know, like, how do you guys think about this?
Which exit hook? Is it an exit register?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
We could also use the deletion.
Those are tricky.
I'm not so sure about it. What would probably work is when we have such an one-line configuration function that it sets such an exit hook by default, but I wouldn't set it unconditionally.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we're considering is, yeah, I think that there's a desire to make it magical, but at the same time, I think the explicit configuration is actually a good thing. Because what if we need to switch the way that things work? I would say the one thing about the configuration that could probably be better is standardizing the way it works, or at least having like a normal API, right? So like, yeah, I guess the spam processor stuff's a little, I mean, that kind of makes sense to me, but also the way that you set sort of the preferred tracer is different than you set like the spam processor stuff. And also this doesn't include the example where you're actually choosing the propagator either. Like it'd be good if the propagator and the tracer follow the same sort of like API design. So it looks very similar, I guess, if you go line by line.
Yeah, for the propagators, when we merged the propagators, if I remember correctly, we said, yeah, let's merge it to have something working, but the spec is going to change anyway. So yeah, maybe we should clean that up a bit in the meantime, because it looks like the spec discussion will take longer. Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned having static config, like Django's config, and that was really nice in OpenCensus. So I think there's like good reason to prioritize this if we're going to work on, say getting a one-line like runtime config solution. I think like having a big static config solution would be great too, especially since we're going to need this soon for metrics.
Yeah.
What do you mean by static config exactly?
So it looks just like Django config, where you have like a single config file that describes the classes that you want to load.
Okay, that is automatically imported if it has the right name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Django has this nice syntax for this, where you like just
so here we have this in OpenCensus, and it works across different HTTP frameworks, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Okay, so I think we've done the easy part. The hard part is to get these items assigned so someone to be able to track this. I think the first one I can take it with Yusuke, and the other part I look for like help from you guys.
Yeah, sorry, Riley, I missed that first part of the conversation. I'm happy. I was just thinking we could work together on it, but did you have a particular approach in mind? I was thinking maybe I could just take the test cases that you've already ran against them and either copy them into OpenTelemetry, or I guess include something that would import that package or something and try to run those tests. Do you have a preference?
Yeah. I think having that external dependency and run that as part of the CI is important, because I know there are still some missing cases in the trace context test. So, for example, like there scenario where we allow people to manipulate the trace state, and I plan to add more test cases to the standard repo.
Okay, got it. I can take a look at that.
Okay. And for matrix exporter, do we think we have a target for alpha 0.2 or overloaded?
Yeah, if you look at the spec, it says we're supposed to have a Prometheus exporter already, but of course the metrics exporter interface isn't spec'd. I think we need to do this before GA. I don't think we need to have this in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, also before beta probably.
Well, yeah. I think that depends what they mean by beta. If they mean
it is not well defined yet, I think.
Yeah. I mean, for the metric stuff too, I'm also curious what the actual sort of full-fledged story is like, because I've seen the examples in the PR as it stands, and you have to actually attach your exporter to every metric that you care about. And so I feel like from a usability standpoint, it's a little bit harder than, if you look at how Prometheus kind of works, right? That client library is just a singleton that just registers a bunch of metrics, and then it's kind of magically binding the two together. I know that internally at Zillow, our version of, metrics basically does the same thing. I'd argue for something similar.
Well, really we should be attaching the exporters to like the aggregation layer, like to views, but we don't have anything in the spec for aggregations yet.
Yeah, right? I 100% agree with what Chris just said. That was my thought as well.
So, I guess, Leighton, do you know, is anyone thinking about that part of it? Or anyone who's involved with metrics?
Yeah, we haven't begun discussion about what the views API, like whether even we're using that. Right now, we're just trying to kind of separate out the current metric spec with like the SDK behavior as well, or we might even include it in the original document. So there hasn't been any discussion yet.
Got it. All right, yeah, I think, I guess I just think about usability, and I know that internally, I don't think we'll be able to adopt open tracing for metrics until that part exists in some capacity.
There is discussion around maybe using like a config file or something to define all of the like what kind of aggregations you want to use. Essentially like a views API, except using like a YAML config file or something like that. I can link you to the issue that talks about that.
Okay.
So the thing that's blocking here is Josh's PR and specs 250. So if you guys have opinions on this, I know he's looking for reviews, even if you're not like a specs approver, but without like the measure definitions being like merged into specs, like we can't do anything with the aggregators or export.
Yeah. Chris, you feel like we can merge this without yet defining what the SDK behavior is like, and then we can have another specs document for metrics?
Yeah, I approved this last night and left some comments.
Yeah, I saw. Okay.
I think if we don't merge it in, we're never going to get to
you're right.
The next layer.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, okay, that's going to be the priority.
For the unit test and coverage, there's already a PR try to add the PI coverage. I think that approach looks good in general, although there's some like feedbacks and there was no response on that. So I wonder, like if Hector, you could pick this up and move forward.
Sure thing.
And so Chris, anything you want to add? I think Hector probably can help here.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to like merge this in once coverage is working, even though it will say that all of our subsequent PRs will fail because we don't have full coverage, and then we can just go through and the people that wrote the code that isn't covered by unit tests can add unit tests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and for generate SDK docs, so currently we have API docs. Is that what you're referring to? So we want to have the similar thing for SDK?
Yeah, and I forget who pointed this out, but we do have a ticket for this, and I think it's just a matter of like shuffling the docs around a little bit to include the SDK.
Mm-hmm.
Like we already have everything set up to like generate and host the docs. We just need to, change the Sphinx manifest files.
So should this be in the same read the docs project, or?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I mean, there will be different chapters probably for the SDK and the API. That should be enough.
The other thing about this is that like we have this kind of ideal where the API package is the API and the SDK implements it, but in practice, there's all this stuff in the SDK that's effectively an API.
Yeah, the like instrument libraries that instrument their own code should only need the API. I think that mostly works, but I think that should completely work. Yeah, but for applications, you obviously have to configure some stuff, and then you need the SDK.
And for vendors too, right? Because vendors need a exporter API, and we put that in the SDK.
Yeah, or they have to rewrite it themselves. Yeah.
No, but I think that the idea with exporters is that you use the SDK, so you don't have to expose that in the API, as far as I know.
No, I understand that, but you're writing an exporter, you're a vendor, and you have, say your own span exporter, right? You need to depend on the SDK just to get the exporter interface.
I see.
But not really, because if you are a vendor and, for example, you only want to export to transfer data to Dynatrace, for example, you don't need the concept of an exporter because you just, if you make it quick and dirty, you just make an HTTP connection in span.end. You don't.
That's true. Also, if you're implementing the whole API yourself, you don't need the exporter API because you could just define your own exporter API.
Yeah.
Although in practice, it might be better for vendors to depend on the SDK. Yeah. In theory, it's not required.
Yeah, but you know, this is like a side note probably, but I was talking to data of people earlier today about some agent stuff, and they mentioned that even though they would like, for example, to have an exporter in the future, they would probably they will implement, you know, their own SDK or have their own SDK implement OpenTelemetry because for them that's greater flexibility. So even though we may want to have all the vendors jump in and, you know, only use exporters, I think that in practice it will happen that probably more people than expected will have their own implementations.
Okay, cool. I'd be interested to see. I mean, if I guess they would have to release the source code for this, right? Because it would be like a user-facing, like Python client. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how they do the, you know, what we're calling export.
Yeah.
So the other two things that I added here to tech debt are getting examples written for the features that we have already. And Yusuke and Riley have already done this. I think it'd be great to have more of these as we decide which features are going into which release, like which alpha release. And then, yeah, we talked about the fact that propagators right now are kind of like a draft implementation of propagators because they weren't finished in the spec. And I don't know what the plan for the spec is, but I think we ought to have like a solid spec for propagators before the beta, whatever we're calling the beta.
Is the date set for October 14th still?
I think if it is October 14th, then it's not a beta. It's just another release of the alpha that should include some stuff. But I think probably what's happening here is these dates, they are like aspirational dates for the spec. They're saying that we want to have these features described in the spec by the 14th. And then like we haven't added any time like to our own milestones to actually implement this stuff. So it might be the case that this stuff gets merged into the spec on like midnight on the 13th, right? And then we're not going to be able to implement it in, you know, 0 days. So I think we probably need different dates for these.
Got it.
Also, all of these, like the alpha milestone deadlines are, I think, like best effort deadlines. I mean, we were the only client library to release the alpha 0.1 on the 30th.
Nice.
We should celebrate. Good job. Although a lot of that.
That's true.
Yeah, I think we don't have a working exporter in the alpha, I think.
Yeah, we can celebrate once we get a working exporter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the docs, I assume Chris, you're going to help on this.
Yeah.
Although I would like to see like more people come and help Chris. Currently, I feel like a little bit regret that Chris has been always helping on this part.
Oh, I don't know. If you look at my contributions, I've been all reviews recently. I want to sit back down and write some code.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit related to the code coverage. I just added an work in progress PR to test more code with MyPy. I know that we don't want to add type annotations to the SDK everywhere, but I think we should at least check that we don't like call any typed functions with wrong parameter types in the SDK also. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
So this is like when you do have types in the SDK, you want to make sure that they're the right types, or what does that mean?
That, and also if the SDK calls an API function, we should detect if the wrong types are used according to the type annotations.
Oh, at runtime?
No, with MyPy, by running MyPy on the SDK.
This is a static check.
Yeah, only if MyPy can, of course, only if MyPy is able to infer the types.
Okay.
I mean,
but in most cases, if you don't have the annotations, it probably won't be able to infer the types.
I don't know if you write x equals span parent, then MyPy should be able to detect that the x is a span. So I think at close range it should detect some issues, but we will see.
Okay, now go to the examples. So I have a pending PR, which I call the simple examples. So there's a feedback from Yusuke. So I want to know what's your feedback here. And I was thinking that, for examples, people would probably prefer to have a very simple thing. So like don't be like put a lot of like prerequisite. Just give me the most simple way to get started. So similar like the Hello World application in C. So give me as less lines of code as possible. I want to get started. And also the example probably will cover like if you just use the API, what would be the behavior? I think currently we don't have a place to explain that. And I tried some folks inside Microsoft, ask them to use this open telemetry. And I figure they always come to me and ask about this concept. So I think in the README file, we'll have in the very beginning, this is the most simple way how you can use the API plus the SDK to send a hello world scan. And later, if you have metrics logs, will follow the same way. And then we'll explain if you're the component developer, you can use the API package only. And this is how it should work. Without the SDK, you got nothing. Performance is super good. And the only thing you have is a propagation. So with that, I think having a package what Yusuke has, that it's something different. So the simple start, I think, is more focusing on giving people the concept without having them to run a full-fledged application. Well, for the use case application, I think it's more like an integration thing. So you want to know how in real world those things should work. And if you look at the simple application, it tries to give people example from different angle with the SDK, without the SDK. How do you configure a propagator? How do you use everything by default, just having a hello world? It's hard to fit into one example app. This is where I start to try to have like single file example. So how do you guys think?
I mean, I think to your point, I do agree that we'll probably have needs to create multiple different examples for different use cases. I think the one thing I would note is right now, I see your point about that, but your server implementation is probably 2 lines different than what the example is today. And so I don't necessarily see a strong need to kind of like bifurcate those. I mean, maybe there's a long-term intention there. And then the other thought I do have is, we do have like a unit test that actually verifies the behaviors as expected. And I think, I mean, the example is great, but there's nothing in, talks or in these examples that actually validates the behaviors as expected. And so, I worry about the maintenance cost of these things, like especially since there's no direct feedback to someone who's making changes, that their change is actually broken some behavior that we're expecting to kind of showcase. So those are kind of my 2 main concerns. I would say if the examples, and also like to your point, I think it would be great if there was one that was literally just the open telemetry API, but your examples also directly not only import from the API, but also import from SDKs and extensions as well. So I don't necessarily see the argument with the example posted that, we need some, like, it doesn't seem to illustrate that this is just a pure API example. This is an example that's maybe a little bit more fleshed out than the example that already exists in the repo.
I see. Yeah, I expect that we're going to add more like a single file example covering the cases where you just use the API, you use the SDK with all the default configuration, you use the SDK with customization, and you cover the client scenario, the server scenario. So this will be isolated examples.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would do is, I mean, we already have a server example that's pretty similar to what you have. The only difference is that the example that you posted includes the spam processing, which could easily be added to the existing example. And then the client could also be added as an, I mean, I see the value for a separate client one. I would love to see that added, but maybe also itself have some sort of testing around that, although they should argue that the...
Yeah, got it. So for test, I totally agree with you.
I mean, I guess I'll defer to maybe other people too. I just don't like this server example seems to just duplicate what's already exists in the example app, at least today. So I don't know if does anyone else have an opinion on the simple client servers.
I mean, I think even if it duplicates what's in there today, like I think when we have all of the tests we intend to have, it'll make sense to have separate, simple, and like full-fledged installable examples. Like this one, because it really is just, you know, like 2 files. I think it serves the purpose of the example better for it not to be like buried in another package, right? It's like pretty obvious what you're supposed to do if there's just a server.py and a client.py.
Okay. I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm not, you know, married to it. So
I think that the big benefit of the example app is going to be like when we have like say examples that use the loader to load different implementations, or that show that you have like different behavior depending on like your dependencies, like right, whether you can load the SDK. And so right now, if people are just running the examples in the same, say, virtual env where they're developing, I mean, the behavior is pretty straightforward, right? But if you want to like show how the app works, you know, depending on your environment, say if you're a library that only depends on the API, or if you're a vendor that like depends on the API but includes their own exporter, like then I think there's like a really good reason to have this packaged as an example app. But right now, for the simple example, I think the app is just like some extra mental overhead for people using it for the first time.
I mean, you have more experience than me as far as people using these types of libraries. So
Can you say it again?
I said you have more experience than me, I think, as far as seeing how what people do or don't understand around these types of examples. So yeah,
this is like I'm actually like largely clueless here too. I think it'd be great to see, you know, some like actual user tests, but as far as I know, we don't have it like the plan or the budget for that.
I mean, we could also take the approach of just adding, you know, whatever examples people see appropriate, and then maybe just like anecdotally getting feedback, and then kind of contributing that back through these meetings later. So
sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, encourage people that use it for the first time to leave feedback and tickets.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be one of those situations where, you know, you're like, hey, I want to run through the examples. You know, I want you to go through the examples yourself and then tell me how the experience was, type of thing.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I might be able to get the other like the other language authors at Google to do this. I can offer them a trade. Like I'll try and run the JavaScript examples. They try and run the Python examples.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey,
yeah.
Riley, when you're talking about docs, which docs were you referring to again?
This is the generated docs, the API and SDK docs. Also, I know that I got here late, but it looks like we are about 2/3 of the way down the agenda here, and we only have 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Right.
This is typical for all these meetings.
Yeah.
I think we haven't covered these topics for the release version. Yeah, we should move forward.
We covered the Jaeger exports already.
Okay, we want to talk about the tracing bridge, open tracing bridge.
Okay, guys, Johannes is not in this meeting today. This is a holiday in Germany. So basically he wrote there the status of the open tracing bridge. As far as I know, this will open a pull request very soon. That's all I can say about the open tracing bridge.
Okay,
Nice.
cool.
Okay.
And we talked enough about the Jaeger exporter, Mauricio, or not?
Yeah, I think we covered that.
Yeah, we covered that.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
All right, Carlos?
Yeah, so basically I created a small PR for updating start span. So yeah, if you guys could take a look after the call or the next days. Chris already gave some feedback, which is very nice. But yeah, I'm waiting for you guys. The other thing is that I will be removing tracer create span, or at least having a PR for that. So
for create span, I'd like to not remove it, but like make it an internal only API, because I found it very useful when implementing a new SDK on top of the official SDK, that you can just override create span in the tracer and return your own span implementation. So maybe we should just remove it from the API, but keep an underscore create span in the SDK. Something
okay,
like that.
okay. So in my PR, I will try to do that if you guys agree with that.
Yeah, I would have to like take another look at it. I don't have any opinion there.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. In any case, yeah, I will be taking a PR. So yeah.
But I would definitely remove create span from the API.
Okay, makes sense. I could say that that's all from my side.
Okay, cool. Riley, is you ready to talk about the logger or log
We
correlation?
have covered that, so it's like something far away. So
yeah, I saw Sergey's response on the spec ticket. I think we should just not plan to have this in any alpha. Yeah, I think that needs to go in the spec first. I'll comment on the specs ticket. Okay, so for release version, right now we have o.1a.o, which follows the Python convention for alpha, beta, and release candidates. This means that we could still release a later version as o.1.0, because like A, B, and RC all get version before the ones without the like the alpha, beta, RC signifier. But we have to figure out what to do for o.2.0, like whether we also include A and tell people that this is an alpha. The problem with doing it this way is the version system in the milestones doc calls them like o.1 alpha, o.2 alpha, and o.3 alpha, which kind of implies that there could be like an o.1, o.2, and o.3 that are not alphas or betas afterwards. So basically just the release schema in specs doesn't match like Python conventions. So
I think what was said in the last spec meeting was that for the O dot versions, languages can do whatever they want, and only after from the 1.0 on, we will start syncing the versions.
Yeah, but so this is a question I want to ask you guys. Like, is whatever we want to keep attaching the little alpha signifier or not? I mean, it might be that it's not useful for anyone, and in which case we can just...
No need to do that, I think.
Okay. I think it's kind of a lost cause to keep these versions in sync with each other before the 1.0 release anyway, but there's a lot of spilled digital ink and hand wringing over this. Okay, and so the last thing I got is we have this error handling doc now in the specs repo that says basically we should eat all errors all the time. We are not really doing this yet because we don't have type checks everywhere. Like one easy way to do this might be to like at some of like the entry points in the API, just have a try, catch finally, or to like put a decorator on some like API methods that are like in the SDK, but like on popular like high level methods that just eat all exceptions. And like one interesting thing about this is that we probably want to eat all the exceptions in production, but then in testing, we want to actually like let them escape and get like meaningful errors in tests. So I think this is something that we should start thinking about soon, but I don't have any specific plan for it.
I remember Matt Ware, who works at the Ruby client, was talking about that, like about the 3 possible options. And
yeah,
said,
he and I went back and forth on the ticket in specs. So there's like the error handling doc that like I think just got merged in. So Sergey originally wrote it, and then I added a bunch of stuff to it, and then Matt and I went back and forth on comments.
Yeah, I want to say that I like to me the best would be to not to try to get all the errors, just try to get the obvious ones. But that's just my opinion. Otherwise, we could end like trying to recover from everything, and it could be weird.
Yeah,
that's just my opinion.
I especially want to avoid having like to type check every argument and then check all of the fields of every argument, right?
Yep. But there are some obvious ones, like just checking like if a string, like when you get the name of a span, just check if it's like null, none, stuff like that, Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll start working on hopefully a first non-controversial version of this in Python, just some basic error checks.
Nice, thank you. Okay, guys, I have to drop. I have another call, so.
Okay. Yeah, thanks everybody. Sorry I was late.
Bye.
Ciao.
Yeah, see you guys.
See you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I guess we are ending the meeting altogether now. Bye.
See ya.
See you.